Well, no pressure being the last speaker of the evening. And knowing me, and if you've encountered the 2 sessions I did today, I just invite myself and everyone to just take 5 seconds and presence. Just take a nice deep breath and let it all go. Clear all the wonderful stories you heard and just become fully present here now. And that I'm saying to myself as much as to you. I have to tell my story. And the reason I'm here today is because I've written this book called Shakti Leadership. And my co-author is this rock star called Raj Sisodia. And those of you who are part of the conscious capitalism movement know him to be one of the main founders, the co-founder of the movement, and everyone just loves him. So this book, Shakti Leadership, is launched this month at the Conscious Capitalism Annual Conference, which was held in Chicago from the 12th to the 14th of April. And there was this woman from India, Nilima Bhatt, and she has a book with Raj Sisodia. You know, who are you? And so it was such curiosity that came at me and a lot of projection that kept coming at me. Perfectly well-meaning people saying, oh, so are you excited? Are you proud? So, well, maybe. Then there was a man who said to me, how do you know Raj? Are you his graduate student? I didn't know what to, why would he say that? And I should have asked him that. What makes you say that? So the story of Shakti Leadership and how does Nilima Bhatt from India, Mumbai, get to write a book with rock star Raj Sisodia called Shakti Leadership. So today is the story of Shakti Leadership and how it gets to come to America. I was thinking I normally have slides, and since I don't have slides, I'm going to invite you to imagine them, okay? So it begins with the first slide. It says, oh my God, I'm Jerry Maguire. So this is 1998. I am in my 10th year of a very, very successful corporate life. I'm looking after corporate communications for ESPN, Star Sports, across Asia Pacific. I'm 32. My husband and I are expatriates in Singapore. I have 2 young kids. And really, this is the height of my corporate career. And yet, I have this sudden existential crisis. Am I making a difference? I'm writing these press releases. I'm sure they just get binned by every journalist that press release reaches. I'm earning a lot of money. I bought the house. I got the trophy husband, got the boy, got the girl 3 years apart. Is this it? I was underwhelmed. This crisis was seriously existential. And I was thinking, as I was growing up, I had this sense of destiny. I had this sense of purpose that I had to make a difference in the world. There was something inside here that needed to come out. And I suddenly realized, this can't be it. Not this, not this, not this. And that's the time the movie Jerry Maguire came out. And it was about the sport world, right? Remember? He's a sports agent. And what does he do? He goes and he writes this amazing big document that he goes and gives everyone about, the truth and the goodness in sport, and let's start living these values. And so there was a book called The Hungry Spirit, which came out at this time by Charles Handy, who is a British management guru. And it said exactly the same thing. The Hungry Spirit said, and I got an executive summary on my desk, it said that as we go through Maslow's hierarchy and we meet our food, water, shelter needs, employees and companies are going to look to meet their spiritual needs, their emotional needs. Their spirit is going to be hungry, and can you feed the spirit? And if you can't feed the hungry spirit in your employees, they're going to leave. So you better figure out a way to keep your employees, you feed their spirit. I said, hallelujah, here's a man who's speaking my language. He's written the book. He's the executive summary right here. I made copies just like Jerry Maguire, and I gave it to all my board. And I remember the glazed look that came back at me. They didn't get it. Of course they didn't get it. It was too hard to understand, and you don't want to get it when it's this fun, adrenaline-filled world and adrenalized world. So the good news was, no one got this, but my husband got transferred to London at this time, and so the whole family moved, and I got to move. So Around this time, The War of the Worlds, this album, was something my husband suddenly discovered. And he would play it night and day for some reason as we were making this move. And you remember that song? There must be something worth living for. Remember? There must be something worth trying for, even something worth dying for. Have you heard this song? Oh my gosh. By the way, I can't sing, okay? My husband will be laughing when he watches this. Oh my God, Nilima, you went and sang on stage. So, that song kept haunting me, right? And as I left the corporate world, that was it. There must be something worth living for. My spirit was hungry. My soul was thirsty. I needed to understand why am I living? There must be something worth living for. And it was so not available in the corporate world at that time. So I moved to London, and just down the road, I found yoga. And this is because my friends were telling me, Nilima, you're asking very existential questions about who am I, why am I here, how am I making a difference? So these are questions your culture has the answers for. Go figure it out. Go and look it up. It's right there in your backyard. So we happened to move to London, but down the road, literally in Putney from Wimbledon, was the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Center. And I went there, and I have never looked back since. So I really kind of came home, and there's something worth living for I have found. I have found yoga philosophy, I have found Vedanta, and along the way I have found so many other, Sufism and Taoism and Jung and Campbell and the wisdom traditions of all the world. And right here, in this head now, is amazing, amazing, beautiful things that make it worth waking up every single day. So I did find something worth living for. So 2 years down the line, it's all hunky-dory. Wimbledon's suiting us great. My husband's turning 40, and he goes for a routine medical checkup. 2 days before we have to go for a holiday back to India, Christmas break, everything's all nice and set. And he calls me from the hospital, his voice shaking, says, you better come here quickly, it's bad news. So I have no idea, my head swims, my knees go liquid. And wildly, I find my way to Baker Street from Wimbledon. I don't know how I get there. He's sitting there in this cold room. He's sobbing. And he says, I've got 2 tumors in my colon. The children were 8 and 11. I was 35. So cut to the next slide. There must be something worth trying for. So suddenly it was about life and death. And we had to do everything we could to make sure he lived. So what had begun as a personal search for growth through yoga, became a search for life and death, finding integrative medicine, holistic health, understanding health and healing. He had to give up his high-flying corporate career. We had to come back to India. The year 2004, went to Bangalore, set up Roots and Wings, our own consulting services in leadership, doing consciousness-based leadership. And we are reading all these books, from Deepak Chopra to Louise Hay to Caroline Myss to some amazing books from around the world. And we are putting together our own healing program to make sure he recovers. Along the way, I realized there are many other cancer patients who do not have the luxury or the bandwidth to find all these ideas. So I put it all together. He and I ran several retreats, and I put together a clinic. We would do a cancer coaching program. I've taken hundreds of patients through that. And he crossed the 5-year mark, and he's crossed the 10-year mark. And this was 2001. We are here in 2016. And he's a gorgeous, healthy man today. And he says, cancer saved my life. And yeah, the cancer was our prasad. Prasad is when you go to a temple in India, you're given just a small amount of something. It's like a gift the deity gives you for having visited. So just the right amount. Too much of that sweet and you'll be sick, but just enough. Right? So the cancer was our prasad. Just enough to help us reorganize our lives, reorient ourselves, understand what is it that was going wrong in our lives. And he had a very unhealthy lifestyle given the very high-profile, corporate, stressful job he had. He had a global job in London. He was on a flight every other day, eating very unhealthy foods. So yes, something worth living for. And the elixir we brought back from that journey through cancer was our first book, my first book. It's called My Cancer Is Me. And once that was done, and he's fine, and the children are grown up, and they've left home, I'm thinking, this is it, now what next? And I'm doing my cancer work, and I have a dream. I have a dream where I'm at the White House, and yes, of course, and we're in this cafeteria, and it's a very egalitarian cafeteria. Everyone's sitting around, and Obama is sitting on the same kind of picnic bench that I'm sitting on, bunch of other people. And someone conversationally asks me, so Nilima, what do you do? And in my mind, I panic because I realize I've been dabbling and doing so many things. And, so how do I kind of capture this purpose that I have to claim and state with great clarity? And I clear my throat and I say, I work for the empowerment of women and to bring the wisdom of India to the world. And even as I'm saying it in my dream, a part of my mind is conscious enough to say, how come you're not saying you work with cancer? What's this you're saying? Where did that come from? Anyway, meanwhile, Obama turns around and looks at me and cynically says, oh, you mean you just talk about it? You're doing lip service. And I looked at him and very vehemently and I say, oh no, I do it by changing one life at a time. And when I claim that truth and I assert it with such conviction, he turns to me and he becomes very emotional. He starts crying and he says, thank you. And he reaches out to hug me. So I hug him back and then, it's this nice moment. It's a very beautiful egalitarian moment. And then the mood changes and he says, do you dance? And I say, yes. And so the table's clear. And he and I get into this amazing dance, and I'm a dancer, so of course I enjoy it. I'm checking him out, can he dance? And turns out he does dance quite well. So someone comes, Mr. President, your appointments are waiting. And he pretends he doesn't hear because he's having such a good time. And only when he's done dancing and, then he says, thank you, he bows and he leaves, and I'm feeling so good. So anyway, that was a funny story, which I think I've told for the first time on camera. But it was an archetypal story. It was a story of my animus and, my power that was basically beginning to rise. And somewhere along this time was, now imagine the last slide, there must be something, even something worth dying for. So something had to die in my life. I had become very codependent. I had become a caregiver to my husband who was coming through cancer. I'd become a full-time mom pretty much. And somewhere I had lost Nilima. And she needed to come back. She wasn't going to wait around much longer. So the girl child needed to die for the whole woman to arrive. So I had to die to my childhood, my innocence, my girl who was very dependent on her mother and her husband and that life, and really just grow up, become her own mother, become her own lover, and take care of her own inner child. And that was a very, very recent and tough journey to make. I had to reclaim power from everyone I had given it away to, and realize that no one understood me. Okay, my mother doesn't get me, my husband doesn't get me, my kids don't get me. My dad gets me. He and I are like two peas in a pod, both very spiritual people. So I didn't really feel understood, and yet I just knew I had to do this work. I had to do the Shakti work. I had to come into this power, not just for my own sake, but for many other women around the world. I needed to claim this and bring this knowledge, this wisdom that I had been gathering over the years about the feminine, about this idea of Shakti, the power of consciousness itself, and that women can access, that it's time for women to wake up and bring this in service of the world. And there's so much wisdom around this from the yogic tradition, and it needs to be told in a way that can make sense in leadership, that can make sense to apply to business, right? So I had this idea in my head. So I told my husband, let's write the second book. And he says, I'm booked out. I've written My Cancer Is Me, no more books from me. So I sat there on my last trip to the US in Manhattan in an apartment, and I banged it out to Raj Sisodia. I said, Raj, will you write this book with me? And he writes back and says, well, I don't know what I'll add to it, but yeah, why not? So that's how this book came about, Shakti Leadership, Embracing Feminine and Masculine Power in Business. So this heroine's journey that I have done, where I've had to die in so many ways to the old patterns which had outlived their time, very much the good wife, good mother. I had to fight many, many battles to really follow my passion, my dream. Very few people believed in me, certainly from my near and dear ones. They just didn't understand why she on this trip, why she rocking the boat, why she going off and doing her own thing. But stayed the distance, went the distance, stayed the course, and so delighted that this book is out. And so my challenge to you is, because we are not in Kansas anymore, we are in Phoenix. What do you need to die to? What do you need to die to? If you can go home tonight and ask yourself that question, what are some patterns in your life that may have got outdated, that you need to move on from, that maybe you're just now comfortable in, but it's no longer really juicing your life? Maybe it's even depleting you. What do you need to die to? And can you trust and invoke the archetype of the phoenix, that when we submit to the death willingly, it's like the 1,000-year-old phoenix lives its full life cycle, but when it's done, it creates its own nest, and then it sets it afire and burns itself down, submits to that death, knowing fully well that there is a resurrection into a healthy new self. So I stand here before you very aware that strange dream of what do? I work for the empowerment of women and to bring the wisdom of India to the world. This is what I'm doing standing here today, and it required a death. So I invite you to all think about what is it that you're ready to die to. Thank you.